Welcome, Minister Mkhize.
Thank you very much. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening to all the comrades.
Yeah, we do understand that you were in a NEC Lekotla, and we did indicate that you were wrapping up and that you will join us. So we are very pleased to have you here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure. My name is Vasu Gounden. I am the Executive Director of Accord and a board member of the Gandhi Development Trust. We are very pleased today, the 2nd of October, the 151st birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, born on the 2nd of October, 1869 in the state of Gujarat in India, who arrived in South Africa many years later as a young lawyer and returned to India. We always proudly say as South Africans that he arrived in South Africa as a young lawyer, and we transformed Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi into a Mahatma and a commissioner of India who is present. I'm sure that India is eternally grateful to South Africa for having converted the Mahatma, the Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi into a Mahatma and having then sent him back to India. And we are very pleased, of course, that we have two political sons from KwaZulu-Natal, where Mahatma Gandhi had his transformation, the Honorable Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, the Honorable Sishla Zikalala, and of course, today, a celebrity in South Africa, the Honorable Minister of Health, in charge of our COVID response, Minister Zweli Mkhize. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on the eve of Gandhiji's 151st birth anniversary, the Phoenix Settlement Trust is delighted today to announce that the information has been received that the South African Heritage Resource Agency, SARA, has gazetted the declaration of the historical portion of the Phoenix settlement as a national heritage site. It is a site that many tourists who come to South Africa always visit because of the significance of the site. And the nomination for the recognition was made by the National Association of African American Studies after extensive research. And we are very, very pleased today that we also have Dr. Joanne Sadler from the NAS, who will say a few words later today. Now, as many of you know, the Phoenix settlement, devoted to Gandhiji's philosophy of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and the principles of Satyagraha, has played an important spiritual and political role throughout its long history by promoting social justice, peace, and equality. Gandhi established the settlement as an experimental communal farm, one guided by respect for all people, and as a challenge to colonial norms of segregation, languages, and religions. He used as a printing press and newspaper as a means to mobilize resistance and promote ethical and moral human development. He believed that communities like Phoenix advocating communal living would form a sound basis for decolonization and the struggle against social injustice. These principles continue to be honored through the work that the Phoenix settlement does, both within the surrounding community and abroad. Gandhi's own transformation, search for truth and enlightenment, principles of fairness, justice, nonviolence, and peace towards all people continues to be a beacon of inspiration today and into the future. Now, it is my pleasure, of course, to introduce today the Premier of our province, the Honorable Sishla Zikalala, who will speak on the importance of the declaration. Honorable Zikalala is the 8th and current Premier of the province of KwaZulu-Natal. He has occupied that position since 2019, and he is also the provincial chair of the ruling party of South Africa, the African National Congress, and a member of the KwaZulu-Natal legislature. From 2016 to 2019, he served as a member of the Executive Committee for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs in KwaZulu-Natal. He joined the ANC in 1990 and has held a number of leadership positions, including Secretary General of the ANC Youth League, Deputy Provincial Secretary of the ANC's KwaZulu-Natal branch, and Provincial Secretary. But what many in KwaZulu don't know is that the Premier also holds a Bachelor of Administration honors degree, cum laude, from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So we are very proud of that, Honorable Premier, as well as a master's degree in commerce. And it is now my pleasure to call upon the Premier to talk about the importance of this declaration. Honorable Premier, you have the floor.
Thanks, Program Director, Mr. Vasu Gandhian, His Excellency, the High Commissioner of India to South Africa, Honorable Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize, Minister of Health, the stalwarts of our freedom struggle, Comrade Ila Gandhi, Mr. Ngidi, who is the advisor to the Premier in KwaZulu-Natal, but who is here as a member of the Phoenix Settlement Trust, and all members of the Phoenix Settlement Trust, the representatives of the UNESCO, Ms. Hifda Sir, as well as all panelists, and greetings to all participants who are with us today. On behalf of the provincial government of KwaZulu-Natal, may I take this opportunity to extend the greetings and good wishes on this very historic day of the 151 since the birth of Mahatma Gandhi. It is significant that this webinar is convened a few weeks before we mark also 160 years of the arrival of the first Indian workers on our shores in 1860. It is 30 years since the release of the father of our democratic South Africa, Utata Nelson Mandela. And therefore, all these historical processes are important milestones in the making of our own society as South Africa, and as we celebrate unity in diversity. We are mostly encouraged by the news of the significant progress in the campaign to have the historic Phoenix settlement declared as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. National recognition is it is very important for us as the country. We wish to applaud the South African Heritage Resource Agency for a good work done in this regard. As KwaZulu-Natal, the significance of this declaration is that this will become the third World Heritage Site in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. But it is a unique one. Ukahlamba Drakensberg World Heritage is because of the environment and tourism offerings and attractions that are offered by Drakensberg Mountain. The Ismangaliso wetland in the northern Natal is because of the heritage, but more importantly, because of the nature of that area, especially having wetlands in various parts of that, and therefore protecting wetlands. What is unique about this is that it resonates with the heritage, our struggle for liberation, and the struggle for peace in KwaZulu-Natal. It serves as a symbol of the revolution, but also as a symbol of peace in a province that was once engulfed by a high level of violence. I think it will be fair for me to borrow from the eloquent book of Sidney Taura, who said in the book, Power in Movement, Social Movement and Contentious Politics, and he said, I quote, The symbols of revolt are not drawn as mass consumed from a cultural closet and are reared before the public, nor are new meanings unrolled out of the whole cloth. The customs of revolt are woven from blend of inherited and invested fibers, close quote. And in this regard, the fiber we talk about, inherited, it is that struggle of a common South Africa, a South Africa that is at peace, but a South Africa that enjoys non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperity for all people. And therefore, today, we are celebrating one of the foundations, a foundation for prosperity, where all people are able to live side by side, irrespective of their gender, their race. Of course, Program Director, you have also alluded to one point. This is going to contribute to the tourism industry. KwaZulu-Natal is known as one province with the growth in the tourism, and tourism contributes close to 10% of the GDP of the province. The province also attracts both domestic and foreign tourists, and therefore, with the Gandhi settlement, were located near the Dube and Seme route, but within eThekwini, this will be an added feature that will address and attract the tourists into our province. I cannot forget the words of His Majesty when he responded to the reopening of the Phoenix settlement in the year 2000, where he said, and I quote, "The settlement will become a beacon of reconciliation and peace," close quote. We are hopeful as the province of KwaZulu-Natal, both as the people of the province and government, that this will be one step to ensure prosperity, reconciliation, and ensure that we live in harmony. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Honorable Premier. And I know your commitment to reconciliation and peace in the province. We work very closely with you, and we know, yes, when you say that Isilo has said a beacon of reconciliation and hope, we certainly want to make sure that this province that has gone from violence to non-violence and stability needs to be kept that way. And the Phoenix settlement, now being a symbol of non-violence, can be used as one of those instruments in our quest for social cohesion, reconciliation, and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure also to call on Dr. Zweli Mkizer, who is a medical doctor. Hence, he is in charge of our COVID response in the country, and I think a lot has to be attributed to the Honorable Minister for the way in which he has steered our response to COVID-19. We have done much better than most other countries in the world in managing to save thousands of lives in South Africa and ensuring that we stem the spread of the virus. He is a legislator and politician who has served as the Minister of Health since 2019. He has also been very heavily involved in our liberation struggle in South Africa and spent many years in exile in Swaziland and Zimbabwe before returning to South Africa in 1991. On his return, he started serving the African National Congress, the ruling party, as a member of its National Health Secretariat, and was the party's Treasurer General between 2012 and 2017. He previously served as Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs at the national level, as the MEC here in KwaZulu-Natal for Health, also as the MEC for Finance and Economic Development, and also as the 5th Premier, the predecessor of the Honorable Sihle Zikalala, He served as the 5th Premier of KwaZulu-Natal. Honorable Minister, it's my pleasure to call upon you to talk about your personal experience with the Phoenix settlement, as well as the significance of the settlement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director Vasu Gaunden, the Honorable, the Premier, Comrade Sihle Zigalala, the High Commissioner of India, Excellency Jagvip Sankar, Comrade Ilakandi, granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi and the stalwart of our struggle in her own right, Mr. Tlatlangiti, trustee of the Phoenix settlement, the Dr. Lemuel Berry, Executive Director of the National Association of African American Studies, Ms. Uma Meshri, University of Western Cape, and Dr. Joanne Sadler from National Association of African American Studies, Mr. Victor Sibek, Chairman of the South-South Cooperation Council, UNESCO representatives, and fellow panelists, and all the participants in this very special occasion. It is indeed a special privilege for us to be able to address you on the evening of the 151st birth anniversary of the great Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, a global icon and a true hero of South Africa's liberation struggle. There are very few such heroes who would actually lead a liberation struggle in 2 countries, in 2 different continents, and of course inspire many, many more in other parts of the world. What a better way of commemorating this legacy of his birth than to have the Phoenix settlements, a monument to his own contribution to our history, being declared a National Heritage Site. We want to congratulate the Phoenix Settlement Trust and all the departmental and other civil society formations that have been part of this journey. We believe it's a really very remarkable achievement. We all know the history of Mahatma Gandhi, who came in as an intellectual, educated in law in the United Kingdom, and then coming to South Africa to be confronted with the discrimination and racial segregation faced by the Indian, the African people, the colored people, under the British and the Boer authorities in our country. And we all remember his story of him being thrown out of the train when he protested that he shouldn't have been moved out of his seat, which he had paid for. But we also know that he inspired a lot more people. One of those is a girl called Valiama Munuswami Mudlia, who was in her 16 years at the time when Mahatma Gandhi was leading the struggle and in the passive resistance movement. This young girl was one of those teenagers who was one of the volunteers and ended up having to be arrested as he was going up in and out, assisting those who had been in prison. And she ultimately, unfortunately, succumbed to tuberculosis at a tender age of 16. But she is one of those heroes and martyrs that when we look back at the inspiration of Mahatma Gandhi and the work that had to be done to take us into the path of our current democracy, we have to continue to celebrate such contributions. And therefore, this celebration is that celebration that begins to look at our history, our joint history as the people of South Africa, how it's a reflection of our fight for non-racialism, our fight against apartheid, our fight for justice, peace, unity, and all of that having been achieved. And today, I think is a very important landmark in that long journey of our struggle. As we find ourselves in this midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, like Gandhiji, inspired by a young girl, Valiama, we also need now to be very strong and have the passion to assist each other during the very difficult times, to be able to talk to all our people, encourage everyone to stand together as we fight against this very problematic pandemic, and which does not know any color, any boundary, any class, and it actually just affects everyone, as it were. And in this case, it's important for us to say there have been such challenges in the past, but working together, we need to be able to hold each other's hands and make sure that we can face this invisible enemy using the basic teachings, the health protocols, and all the education that has been given to us to be able to face this COVID-19. And indeed, we have done our best as a country, and we ended up with less than, better outcomes than what we initially thought was going to happen. But let's also say that we should not be complacent, because there will be a risk of a resurgence which still awaits us. And so from that point of view, we need to remember that this is one situation where we always say no one is safe until everyone else is safe. And so before there is any vaccine, we need to work together to fight this particular pandemic. But Mahatma Gandhi left this kind of legacy which typifies the characteristics of the iconic leadership that was demonstrated by some of our leaders, such as Nelson Mandela, Albert Lutuli, Oliver Tambo. And all of this leadership created what was ultimately known as the Congress traditions, a kind of leadership that was characterized by selflessness, humility, and a fight for justice, quest for justice, for peace, and fighting for democracy and human rights. This, again, was what we would call personification of Ubuntu. And this is something that really becomes a unique brand of the principles that we'd like to see on all our leaders. We also know that Gandhiji also had coined a number of other concepts. We've heard of Sarvodaya, but we also heard of Ahimsa, we heard of Satyagraha, which he described it as the truth force or love force or soul force, and then felt that the term passive resistance was not reflecting properly the issue, because there had to be activism. And you had argued that if you believed in the truth and you cared enough to obtain it, then you could not afford to be passive. You had to be prepared to actively fight and suffer. And in this case, he created that kind of culture, which was part of the philosophical approach that our liberation movement had embraced. And of course, this is the spirit upon which Gandhiji had embarked on his personal and socio-political journey of spiritual, mental, psychological emancipation. And this settlement represents the encapsulation of these nation healing virtues. And it has been in the history of this particular area, an area where we used to get the youth, as the young people, particularly in the 60s and 70s, would come out to the Phoenix settlements for political, education, for retreats, for discussing, going there to sit down and look at the future of our country, to say what role should we as young people what role should we be playing at that level. So Phoenix settlement has continued to play a role of really assisting in incubating younger leadership with a vision to look at South Africa as the country that unites all its people and that would be able to fight against all the problems of our past oppression and discrimination. It is also a history, the Phoenix settlement is also got the history of having been the area of founders, because not only did Mahatma Gandhi found the Natal Indian Congress and the passive resistance movement, but across the valley was Dr. John Dube, who was the first president of the African National Congress, and across the other valley was the Professor Isaiah Shembe, who also in his own way, was also a leader who created one of the largest indigenous churches in the country, making this whole area of Inanda actually a center of modern society activism in search of freedom and the journey for self-actualization and search for dignity. We all recall as well that this spirit was the same spirit that brought about the motivation and the support for what later was known as the Doctors' Pact, a joint declaration of cooperation signed by Dr. A.P. Kuma, Dr. Yusuf Dadu, and Dr. Monty Naika in 1947. And this, according to some of the writing in the satyagraha.org.za, it says this pact, and I quote, "The pact laid a foundation for future cooperation of Africans, Indians, and Colored, since it respected the independence of each individual group, but acknowledged the achievements that could be realized from acting in concert. The Doctors' Pact participated in a series of non-racial, anti-governmental campaigns around the country, which sought to bring together Africans, Indians into the freedom struggle," unquote. Now, this basically closes the issue about how we saw ourselves as oppressed, as Blacks, as one people united in the fight against the adversity of oppression and discrimination. And this is something that we need to preserve as a legacy of our past. And therefore, as we move into the future, we must never allow anything to actually create any divisions amongst our people during this time. We would recall as well as students in the medical school, we actually worked together in a community clinic that was located in the Phoenix settlement. The students collected funds and worked together with the community to build the clinic, to run the clinic, where every weekend we would come and look at people who otherwise would not have had any access to health services. This was one of the two clinics which were running in Inanda. One was the other area which was called Ngonga Ngonga, which is the other side as you move up the valley of Inanda. And all of this was part of what conscientized all of us to say that it was not just enough to become a doctor. What is important is to always understand the interconnection between your own services that you will render, as well as the need to fight for the greater cause for community, and particularly to ensure that we overthrow the apartheid government, because we understood that treating one patient was not enough. The entire society needs to be able to take charge of the levers of power and ensure that the government that is in charge is based on the will of the people, as has been put in the Freedom Charter. So this, therefore, has been a site of activism, has been a site of service, has been a site of sitting and looking at the future of the country. And it's important for us to say at this point, as we reflect on that, there's a lot of values and lessons that we need to put together to look at the experience that we have gone through. Amongst those has been our quest for ensuring that there is universal health coverage for all the people of South Africa to have access to quality care, irrespective of their ability to pay and their stations in society. But it also means we have to continue to fight for the true liberation of our people, to eliminate poverty, unemployment, and inequality, and bring closer to our people the challenges of the past, underdevelopment, issues such as the lack of housing, water, sanitation, food security. All of these come together because Gandhiji once said, it is the health that is the real wealth, not the pieces of gold and silver. And therefore, as we come together today to celebrate this achievement, we need to say to ourselves, it must create an inspiration for us to come together to fight against lots of ills that we see in our community, the issues of greed, issues of corruption, issues of arrogance amongst some of our own leaders. All of those things need to be dealt with, because we have already a model of what kind of leadership we need to be able to focus on. As freedom fighters, like Gandhiji, the Freedom Charter and the Constitution are giving us enough guidance in terms of what needs to be done as we move into the future. So from that point of view, therefore, we need to then encourage the kind of leadership that will embrace the spirit that Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Albert Lutuli represented, of a selfless leadership who are humble, who respect the people and are able to support good, strong governance and ensure that we are able to work together with whatever Miaga resources to help our people to get a better life for all the people of our country. And from that point of view, therefore, we would like to congratulate the Mahatma Gandhi Settlement Trust for all the work that have been done to bring about to the recognition that we have. We therefore also would like to thank the government for coming on board and looking at what can be done, because I think we need to look at further investments that will help to improve and make sure that the settlement looks and is able to represent this very rich history of our struggle. And I think the presence of the leader of our government in the province is a very, very important issue in ensuring that for going to the future, some work is done in collaboration both by community and the government in the province. With those words, we'd like to congratulate you once again and thank you very, very much for according us the opportunity to share with you in this very important celebration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that excellent reflection on the history of the Gandhi settlement. I think something that none of us might have reflected is the importance of all of the founders of Gandhi and Dr. Dube and Professor Shemba. I didn't even myself put that together. I think that's excellent, and maybe something we need to follow up in the province here, looking at how we link the significance of that. And I know Ella Gandhi, who is here, will be thinking about that also. So, Minister, also I think in the spirit of COVID, your quotation there, Gandhi saying, it is the health that is our real wealth, not the pieces of silver. And I think more and more people today with COVID-19, that should ring true for everybody, that it is our health that is the real wealth. And now that we are also dealing with corruption in the country, I think it's an even more significant time for people to know that it is not the pieces of silver. Minister, thank you very much. We also note that apart from your talents as Minister of Health, you are also an extremely talented dancer. And we saw your moves with Jerusalem on Heritage Day. We are also going to ask you not only to teach us about COVID-19, but I think the public are going to demand that you give some lessons on national television. So we hope you will soon be doing that. But Minister, you said Mahatma Gandhi led on 2 different continents liberation movements, and now from the other continent, we're very pleased that we are host of another very prominent Indian here in KwaZulu-Natal, the High Commissioner of India to South Africa, His Excellency Sri Jaideep Sarkar. High Commissioner Sarkar has served in India's missions in Tokyo, in Korea and Bangladesh, and has held both political and economic positions. He worked with the Ministry of Finance from 1992 to 1996, dealing with economic relations with European Union member states, and served as director in the Ministry of External Affairs, managing India's relations with some of its neighbors. He joined the Prime Minister's office in 2004 as director dealing with a number of ministries, including External Affairs, Finance, and Planning. In 2006, He served as private secretary to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Prior to his appointment as the High Commissioner to South Africa, he was India's ambassador to Bhutan and Israel, so a very, very distinguished diplomat. We are very pleased that India has sent this distinguished diplomat to KwaZulu-Natal. High Commissioner, we are very pleased you are here with us, and we give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Honorable Mr. Sishle Zikalala, Premier of the Province of KwaZulu-Natal, Honorable Dr. Zweli Makhize, Minister of Health, Ila Gandhiji, good evening, namaste, sani bonani to everyone. The declaration of the Phoenix settlement as a national heritage site of South Africa is indeed a fitting tribute that marks and honors this year's birth anniversary of Gandhiji. This declaration honors the work of one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century, but it also recognizes one of the most significant shared historical legacies of India and South Africa. So I wish to express my deep gratitude to the government of South Africa and to all others who have worked to make this possible. The declaration will preserve for generations the historical site associated with Gandhi's transformation as a political, social, and spiritual being. But more important than preserving the physical site, as important as that is really preserving what Gandhiji learned here. He himself wrote that he named the place Phoenix so that the aims and ideas it spawned would, like the bird which repeatedly comes back from its ashes, live on. In particular, we should work to promote the timeless messages of simple living and high thinking, self-help and the dignity of labor, interfaith harmony, cleanliness and conservation, all ideas that were dear to Gandhiji's heart. But for this, we have to invest much more in Phoenix settlement, and we will require the support and cooperation and involvement of the larger community of Inanda. As the minister mentioned, Gandhi and John Dubé, the first president of the African National Congress, were neighbors in Inanda. Just as Gandhi worked at the Phoenix settlement, John Dubé was doing pioneering work at the nearby Oshlange Institute. It was through these important and formative associations with other African leaders that Gandhi developed his ideas and understood the larger context in which freedom struggles had to be waged, not within the narrow confines of a community, but within the larger collective of communities. When the African National Congress was founded in 1912, Gandhi wrote in his newspaper, Indian Opinion, that the event represented, and I quote, the awakening of Africa. The principles and values that Gandhi learnt and developed during his stay in South Africa inspired freedom struggles in India and elsewhere. But his vehement opposition to racism, communalism, and other forms of social oppression also became founding tenets of the newly independent India. And thus it was no surprise that India was one of the most important voices that spoke out strongly against the apartheid government in South Africa. And Program Director, you mentioned about how in South Africa, Gandhi became transformed from Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi to a great soul. And it was during that process that he developed the values that became so dear to independent India. India was the first country to sever trade relations with the apartheid government in 1946 and subsequently imposed a complete diplomatic, commercial, cultural, and sports embargo on South Africa. India worked consistently to put the issue of apartheid on the agenda of the UN, on the agenda of the non-aligned movement and other multilateral organizations, and for the imposition of comprehensive international sanctions on the apartheid government. The ANC maintained a representative office in New Delhi from the 1960s onwards. and India actively worked for the Africa Fund to sustain the struggle through support to the frontline country. Madiba himself has written about Gandhiji's influence on him and on the early politics of the freedom struggle in South Africa. But Madiba had a deeper understanding of what Gandhi was actually fighting for. At a speech he gave at Pietermaritzburg on 6th June 1993, the 100th anniversary of the train incident, Madiba spoke about the enemies Gandhi fought: ignorance, disease, unemployment, poverty, and violence. It was these evils that both Madiba and Gandhi spent their lives working for their people to be free of. It is on these weighty foundations that India and South Africa are working together on the world stage as major emerging economies. Our strong bilateral relations are underpinned by a strategic partnership spread across many sectors. We are close partners in BRICS, in IBSA, the India-Brazil-South Africa platform, G20 and G4 forums. Trade and investment relations between our countries have grown stronger with each passing decade. In recent months, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how important it is for nations to cooperate in facing challenges that do not respect borders. In his speech at the United Nations General Assembly earlier this month, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji said that India's vaccine production and delivery capacity will be used to help all humanity in fighting this crisis. Even earlier, when he had spoken to the Honorable President of South Africa, he had offered all support to South Africa as the AU chair as it leads Africa's effort to combat this deadly virus. There is tremendous potential for further strengthening relations between our two countries in fields like agriculture, rural development, health, education, and skilling, all areas which were dear to Gandhiji. The Gandhi Mandela Vocational Center that has been set up at the Shwane South TVET College is a significant milestone that not only recognizes these two great leaders, but also in our bilateral relations. And we hope that it will be a similar model for similar initiatives in provinces such as KwaZulu-Natal. Friends, let us pledge to work together to build an India and South Africa Gandhiji and Madiba would have been proud of. I thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner, for those wonderful words. And I know that we are hosting you virtually in KwaZulu-Natal. I'm sure you are still in your home in Pretoria, but I'm sure even on behalf of the Honorable Premier, I can extend an invitation to you to visit all of us in KwaZulu-Natal and to visit the Gandhi settlement. And we hope that together with the government of South Africa and the government of India, we will be able to raise the significance of the Gandhi settlement and even begin to construct a more monumental house of peace that can reverberate peace throughout South Africa and throughout the world also. So thank you very much, High Commissioner, for those words. And we look forward to welcoming you to KwaZulu-Natal and to the Gandhi settlement. It is now my pleasure to call upon one of the trustees of the Gandhi settlement. Many of you know him much better as a very recognized attorney in the Durban area, Mr. Nhlanhla Ngidi, an old friend of ours. But what many people don't realize, apart from the fact that he does serve as an advisor in the Premier's office, was the Director General, that in 1987, way before our country gained its democracy, he represented the governing party today, the African National Congress, then a liberation movement. He represented his youth section at the United Nations Special Committee Against Apartheid, which High Commissioner of India knows that India played a very, very important role in that particular committee with Mr. Reddy being the representative of India there. Mr. Ngidi was also observer of the general elections in the United Kingdom on behalf of the ANC, then in preparation for the 1994 elections in South Africa. So he has played a very, very prominent role externally prior to our democracy, and has been a major pillar in our public administration here in KwaZulu-Natal. And so it is my pleasure now to call upon today in his capacity as a trustee of the Gandhi settlement, Mr. Nhlanhla Ngidi. Nhlanhla, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And may I start by greeting the program director, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Khuzeni, the Minister of Health, Kabazela, High Commissioner of India, all the esteemed trustees led by Comrade Ila, and all the esteemed participants of this program. Today is a proud day for the Phoenix Settlement Trust and all those associated with it, as we commemorate an important milestone in the life of the settlement. That milestone is the official declaration of the Phoenix Settlement as a National Heritage Site. As we know, this is the first step to being declared an international heritage, and we do believe that in our lifetime that will happen. Another important point to note is that the commemoration coincides with Mahatma Gandhi's 151st birthday. All of us know that we have just emerged from a year-long celebration of 150 years since he was born. As we did that, we were recalling his contribution to the cause of freedom and justice, not only in South Africa and India, but the world over. As the board of the Phoenix settlement, we take pride and feel honored that the entire progressive community of the world, leaders and ordinary people alike, is together with us as we observe this moment in history. What does this all mean to us? Firstly, it elevates the status of the settlement. It no longer belongs only to a few people at Inanda and a few people who associate with the settlement, but it is now a national possession. It is therefore no longer the duty only of the board to ensure its survival, but that of the entire nation. It is now our heritage. The next step we will be taking the settlement the next thing we'll be talking about the settlement in international forums as we campaign for the international heritage status. Whether we achieve international status or not, the fact of the matter is that the settlement, a small and perhaps insignificant town of Phoenix, will now be the subject of international conversation. The settlement becomes more of a lodestar for progress and development. The teachings, values, and principles of Gandhi, with whom the place is closely associated, take more of a center stage. It is important at this stage to pause a while and consider the importance of the Gandhian principles, values, and teachings. I could go on the whole night pinpointing these principles, but I only choose to talk about two: a man of peace and justice. He looked at both as inseparable twins, such that he was prepared to sacrifice even his life to achieve these ideals. There can be no justice in poverty. There can never be peace if the people live in a state of want. Gandhi, if he lived today, would be sparing nothing in ensuring that poverty, disease, and ignorance are banished from our country. One of the pillars of Gandhian philosophy, namely Savodia, is testament to this. One of the Gandhian codes underpinning this goes like: civil disobedience becomes a sacred duty when the state has become lawless and corrupt, and a citizen who batters with such a state shares in its corruption and lawlessness, close quotes. Voices discrediting Gandhi have been heard of late. A Ghanaian university and other institutions of higher learning have been associated with these voices. He has been called a racist and anti-African, and many other bad things. It should not be denied that there was a time when he harbored some unsavory thoughts, but to me, that is not the most important thing. He outgrew these prejudices and actually became a Mahatma, a holy man, a man who stood for justice for all, a man who demonstrated unwavering abhorrence for injustice and cruelty. That is what is more important. Mandela, writing on this, says, and I quote, Gandhi must be forgiven those prejudices and judged in the context of time and circumstances. We are looking here at the young Gandhi still to become a Mahatma when he was without human prejudice, save that in favor of truth and justice, close quotes. We cannot always dwell in the past. And in fact, those who do so are mischievous. They forget and choose to ignore what he wrote in 1908, and I quote, South Africa would probably be a howling wilderness without the Africans. If we look into the future, is it not a heritage we have to leave to posterity that different races commingle and produce a civilization that perhaps the world has not yet seen? As an African myself, I have forgiven Gandhi for his mistakes. I regard him as a man of honor who, during his time, rose above all prejudices and embraced the universal egalitarianism of humankind. Gandhi's pronouncements are also underscored by his close friendship with a number of Africans, including the founder of the Nazareth Baptist Church, Isaiah Shembe. On behalf of the Phoenix Settlement Trust, I with humility welcome the new status of the settlement. While welcoming it, we recognize the new challenges it brings forth. We have to double our efforts in ensuring that the settlement is a centerpiece of peace, justice, and truth, a place where the Gandhian principles of Sarvodaya and Satyagraha are propagated and practiced, a haven for anti-corruption and anti-lawlessness. We look forward when the settlement will be granted the status of an international site. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Nsla Ngidi, for that message on behalf of the trust. And I'm sure that all of us now associated with the trust will be working very, very hard to ensure it becomes a UNESCO heritage site. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all of this started because it was initiated and the nomination was done for the recognition by the National Association of African American Studies after extensive research. And I see that, although not on the screen now, but I just looked through the attendees and I saw that Dr. Berry is one of the attendees. So I hope the administrators of this Zoom webinar will locate Dr. Berry and I hope he can be located. Dr. Berry serves as the Executive Director of the National Association of African American Studies and its affiliates. He also serves as the lead person in working with government and local agencies in the nomination process for the Phoenix settlement. And he was involved in the inscription as a World Heritage Site and, or rather, he is involved in advocating for it to become a World Heritage Site. So I don't know with the administrators of the Zoom webinar whether we could get Dr. Berry on to speak. Is it possible to get Dr. Berry? I see he is attending, and I know Dr. Sadler did indicate that he will be attending. And since you have played such a prominent role in this process, Dr. Berry, we would like you to at least say something and outline the process. So I don't know, let me see. I see our colleagues are asking the name, and I'm going through the attendees now. And I see on the attendee list, Lemuel Berry Jr. I hope I pronounced your name right. Okay, so whilst our colleagues are locating Dr. Berry, who will speak next, it is now my pleasure also to introduce Dr. Joanne Sadler, born in Buffalo, in New York. Dr. Sadler was a supervisor of curriculum for the Buffalo Public Schools. For more than 16 years, she was the director of the African and African American Curriculum Infusion Program, which aimed to encourage the teaching of African and African American content in all subject areas and grade levels. She is the author of an African American history book called Here and There, Then and Now, A History of Africans in America. She is a global representative for the National Association of African American Studies. Dr. Sadler, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It is my extreme pleasure to have been invited to address this audience on the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi and the recognition of International Nonviolence Day. The sharing of information and meeting colleagues has always brought joy to my day-to-day activities as an educator and researcher. I am, as stated, Dr. Joanne Zadler. I currently serve as a global representative for the National Association of African American Studies and affiliates. For those of you who may not be familiar with the association and our affiliates, I first would like to note that the affiliates include the National Association of Native American Studies, the National Association of Hispanic and Latino Studies, and the International Association of Asian Studies. We are the only multicultural research association in the United States, and as such, our activities span across the globe. The National Association of African American Studies and Affiliates was founded in 1992 on the campus of Virginia State University in Petersburg, Virginia. The founders created a foundation that supported continuous growth, respect for the global community, professional development, and an overarching goal of providing faculty and students an opportunity to engage in scholarly endeavors. This goal has been expanded, and the following represents the foundation from which the associations derive their current direction and activity. The association's overall goal, as stated, is to serve as a resource for scholars in the field who desire information and to provide support for research related to the African and African American, Hispanic, Latino and Chicano, Native American and Asian experiences. From this specific goal, the associations have established the following objectives: to promote acquaintanceship and group effort among those interested in African Americans, Hispanics, Latinos and Chicanos, Native Americans and Asians; to further the cause of research in African American, Hispanic, Latino and Chicano, Native American and Asian studies; to stimulate greater public interest and better informed public opinion regarding these groups; to serve as a forum for the expression of research and artistic endeavors in the celebration of the lives and works of African Americans, Hispanics, Latinos, and Chicanos, Native Americans, and Asians to provide research and information on African American, Hispanic, Latino, and Chicanos, Native American, and Asian studies in publications and a referee journal, to promote globalization through international forums, to maintain archives, which will be made available to all who are desirous of using the available resources, and to support and host a national conference each year, which will provide students and scholars an opportunity to present research in an open forum. NAS and affiliates produced its first referee journal in 1997, the Journal of Intercultural Disciplines. This respected publication is available to the professional as well as the general public. The development of international programs formed abroad played a significant role in establishing the association's second referee journal, the Journal of Science and Exploratory Studies. Both journals focus attention towards issues that persons of color endure across the globe: social, civil, environmental, education, women's rights, famine, child trafficking are concerns that require global attention. These topics are featured in both publications. Scholars from across the globe are encouraged to participate by submission of research for publication. The leadership of NAS and affiliates is active in defending and promoting respect for economic, social, political, civil, and cultural rights as contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As such, the association continues to be well informed of the challenges, needs, and outcomes of issues brought forth by UNESCO, the World Health Organization, the Anti-Slavery International, and European Center for Minority Issues. NAS and affiliates have found that civil rights, often exposed in developing countries, also appear on the doorstep of people of color and the disenfranchised in the United States. Historically, the national organization has served as host for a national conference each February. The conference attracts scholars from colleges and universities across the United States and many foreign countries, such as Australia, China, India, Ghana, Saudi Arabia, Rwanda, and even Poland. The national conference traditionally provides opportunities for scholars, students, and guests to engage in intellectual dialogue on a broad range of topics. Traditional subject areas include immigration issues, social sciences, fine arts, business, health sciences, education, medicine, and others. Information is shared with attendees through paper presentations, roundtable discussions, panels, and demonstrations. The national organization provides undergraduate honors and graduate students the opportunity to participate in the conference through the creation of poster presentations. More than 100 students participate in the poster presentation program on an annual basis. The conference also includes a career fair, health screenings, a book fair, exhibits, entertainment, and academic training skills, such as test taking and career planning for junior and senior high school students. The conference truly provides an experience for attendees that cannot be found in any other setting. NAS and affiliates host a number of annual events also. They include an international research forum, regional conferences, special development projects, international culture tours, joint research projects, and training programs. Several organizations who share and address similar civic and social challenges and who have partnered with NAS include the African American Drug Policy Agency, the Society for the Scientific Study of Sexuality, and the Native American Fatherhood and Family Association. I cannot overly express the value and service NAS and affiliates bring to the global community. The linkage that Dr. Lemuel Berry Jr. and the association has established with the Phoenix Settlement, members of the Gandhi Development Trust, the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and the Republic of South Africa will be recognized as one among many storied relationships. In closing, please accept my appreciation for being invited to participate in the sharing of my experiences about NAS, as well as the civil and social recognition this association brings to the broader community. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sadler, for your contributions. And I see we have finally located Dr. Berry. Welcome, Dr. Berry. It is a pleasure to have you here. I've just indicated to people that you are the Executive Director of the National Association of African American Studies and Affiliates, and you are the initiator of this entire project. So I think you're the man of the moment. Well, Dr. Sadler has told us a lot about NAS. So I think we'd like you to focus just on the process in relation to how we got here to having the heritage site declared. So Dr. Berry, over to you.
Thank you. And can you hear me?
Yes, we can, very clearly.
You're talking to a person who is not technically sound. And actually, I was with you about 30 minutes before we started. So I've heard every word that has been shared with the audience. However, I'm pleased and honored for the invitation to address the audience on the date of Mahatma Gandhi's birthday at the International Day of Nonviolence. It was also a week ago today that Mrs. Gandhi and I were informed that the Phoenix Summit had received official notice of being granted National Heritage status from South Africa Heritage and Resource Agency. However, before I share my activity and association with the Phoenix Settlement, I would like to take just a brief moment to express my appreciation to the Premier, Shele Zikalala, the Honorable Minister Mkhize, and the Honorable High Commissioner of India for giving up their valuable time to be with us today. I also bring you greetings from the Governor of the state of Maine, Janet Mills, who has been a key participant in the process, and also our State Senator, Angus King. In 2016, I and several colleagues visit Durban to select a site for our 2017 International Conference. While in Durban, the group was extended an invitation to visit the Phoenix Settlement. Shortly after our arrival, Mrs. Ela Gandhi appeared. During the next hour, I experienced a tour that persons seldom encounter. Not only was I introduced to the composition of the settlement, the history behind the pictures and artifacts, but I gained major insight from a person who lived at the settlement and who experienced many of the changes and developments that occurred over a number of years. At the close of the visit, if she remembers, I had a number of questions. But one of the questions I raised was, when did the settlement become a World Heritage Site? The response I received from her caught me totally off guard when informed that the settlement had not been declared a World Heritage Site. I immediately realized that I was at a fork in the road. One road was obviously marked as being frequently traveled. However, I decided to take the road less traveled. And in this regard, at that time, I asked Mrs. Gandhi whether she would give me the opportunity and our organization the opportunity to pursue World Heritage Inscription from UNESCO. Evidently, she said yes, because we're here today talking about it. At the outset of the committee's research, we found that the settlement had not received Provincial Heritage Inscription through AMAFA, nor National Heritage Inscription through the South Africa Heritage and Resource Agency. This information brought a new awareness of responsibilities and direction of the committee, and in essence, changed the course of the committee. We now felt the need to acquire all three forms of inscription: provincial heritage inscription, national, and also World Heritage inscription through UNESCO. On July 25th, 2017, slightly 1 month to the year I'd met Mrs. Gandhi, she and I traveled to Petersmarsburg, where we personally delivered the nomination document to Amafa for provincial heritage inscription. On July 27th, 2 days later, the nomination document for national heritage inscription was mailed to Sahara. And today we celebrate the awarding of national heritage inscription. The journey thus far has been unique and a learned experience. I've always asked myself, I wonder how many persons are aware that there are more than 3,000 book publications that have been written about Mahatma Gandhi and the Phoenix settlement, and that there are more than 15,000 articles that have been written by scholars from across the globe about Gandhi, the settlement, the social injustice. As a continued part of the process, as we move toward World Heritage inscription, the committee continues to review documents and records. Just a sampling of our more than 60 files of collected reports include review of flood zones in Durban, collection of zoning areas that surround the settlement, cross-reference of historical events of the time, reflections of social statistics within Durban versus the social statistics of the settlement, confirming the settlement boundary, having architects provide us with original floor plans of the buildings, collection of more than 300 photographs of the settlement and the internal components. Our files are definitely enhanced. I know that some of you are saying to yourself, what's the status of receiving World Heritage inscription now that we have National Heritage inscription? Well, on May 11th, 2019, the initial document titled Tentative List Report was delivered to the Department of Fisheries, Forestries, and the Environment, located in Pretoria. Once this document is approved by this respective office, the Phoenix Summit will be placed in nomination by the Republic of South Africa and placed on the tentative list to become a future World Heritage Site. And this report would be forwarded to UNESCO in Paris. While this process is ongoing, our committee is still in the process of completing the document, and I anticipate that the document will be in its final stage and completed within the next week or two. As you're aware, the world came to a halt in January 2020 when the airborne coronavirus became public. This global pandemic has delayed a number of activities, but we hope that within the next 12 months, we will all gather together to celebrate the Phoenix Settlement's major achievement via being awarded World Heritage inscription from UNESCO. In closing, I would like to invite all participants of this webinar to become part of the Phoenix Settlement UNESCO team. There are many avenues available where support would be valuable. I would also be remiss if I failed to recognize persons who have walked every step with me and the committee as we travel the road toward World Heritage inscription. I'd like to thank Kadar. I would like to thank him for his input, his insight, and encouragement. I'd like to thank Satish. Thanks for capturing the settlement's unique characteristics through photography and word. And I cannot overlook Uma, who without her historical analysis and clarification, I would be in a lot of trouble. And I'd also like to thank her for visiting with myself and Sahara in April 2019 when I made a public presentation before Sahara in Cape Town. And lastly, I would also like to thank Mrs. Gandhi, but sometimes persons of her stature fail to toot their own horn. So she really needs someone like myself to put it in a way that clarifies her style. I'd like for you to picture the people I previously mentioned, and maybe an additional 40 or 50 professionals who played a role in the entire process as one large group sitting in a cup, like a cup of coffee. We have the cup that is whose job is to maintain the heat. We have the coffee that gives us the flavor and the aroma. We drop in the milk and we drop in the sugar. The problem is the single ingredients play a role, but they're missing the key ingredient, and that is the stirrer. Once the stirrer mixes the cream and the sugar, we have a quality cup of coffee. Well, Mrs. Gandhi is not going to tell you this, but she is the stirrer. She is the person who encourages us to work. She keeps us on track. She is the person who encourages us to combine our efforts. She is the person who encourages us to continue working when confronted with challenges. She is the person who stresses the importance of a common goal. And also, through act and deed, she is the person who promotes social justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Berry. We all thank you. We thank you for your sterling efforts. We bless the day that you stumbled on the Gandhi settlement, and it vindicates the fact that this should be on the tourist site. And it's just a coincidence now that we have also, and I'm going to now ask one of our colleagues who is here to switch on her camera also, the media liaison officer to our minister, Dr. Zweli Mkiza, Luazi Manzi. Luazi, can you switch your camera on? By the way, Dr. Berry, on that fateful day, when you were on that tour, Luazi Manzi was on that tour with you. So she's quite surprised about this entire development today. It's just a coincidence that all of that time. So I don't know, Luazi, can you switch your camera on here? And then Dr. Berry, you can see Luazi there down at the bottom. Camera is there. I'm sure she will switch it on shortly. And then you will see her. So it was an historic day. And as you can see now, the coincidence of someone also participating here and recognizing the coincidence of that. And of course, you listed Satish and Kedar and Uma, the great-grandchildren of Mahatma Gandhi. You know, who still remain committed and dedicated to the mission of Mahatma Gandhi. And this is not totally usual that you see the children and the grandchildren, especially taking after the person himself. Sometimes, you know, a generation drops aside, and we've seen that many times. So we are very, very pleased that this generation of Gandhis have continued the tradition. Kedar is on standby somewhere. He's one of the co-hosts today. The son of Ella Gandhi, and Satish, the nephew, is here with us. And now we're very pleased that Professor Uma Misri, who was so helpful in the history, the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi, born here in Durban. Professor Misri has worked at the university here, the local university of KwaZulu-Natal, then Durban Westville, the University of Cape Town, and the University of the Western Cape, where she also serves as Deputy Dean of Research in the Arts Faculty. Teaching areas are the South African city, forced removals and land restitution and national liberation struggles. She is also recognized as a leading scholar in the field of Indian South African connected histories. Uma, it's a pleasure to have you here, and we give you the floor. We have about 30 minutes and we have about 4 speakers. So we'll give each of the speakers about 5 minutes. And Dr. Berry, on my left-hand side at the corner is Luazi Manzi. So I'm sure you will see her now. She accompanied you on that day. Uma, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to express my appreciation for all the speakers who went before me and to recognize you. I wanted to say that one of my projects at the moment is writing a history of Phoenix settlement from 1904 to 2020. So that's 116 years of history. What I'm trying to do is to try and to write a biography of the settlement through the people who lived there. So I think it's very important to recognize that when Gandhi is extremely significant in establishing the values of the settlement, but my book seeks to look at to what extent those values were carried over through all the subsequent decades. And so it recognizes, for instance, once Gandhi left, that had it not been for Gandhi's son Manilal, actually we would not be sitting here today, because he saved Phoenix and Phoenix saved him. And also, we would not be sitting here if his wife Sushila Gandhi didn't carry on the beacon even after her husband died as the managing trustee of Phoenix Settlement. And then subsequently, it would be amiss to not mention Mewa Ramgobin and Ila Gandhi and the work that they did in the settlement. So I wanted to start out with recognizing the connection between African Americans and Gandhi and the Phoenix Settlement Trust. You know, this goes back to quite an early stage. In fact, might not be as well known that when Gandhi arrived in 1893, and then he had this traumatic journey, which we all know about. But when he got to Pretoria and he got to the station, he didn't know where to go and stay. And it was an African-American gentleman, and unfortunately his name we do not have, who took him to the hotel where he subsequently stayed. And then I think in the history of Phoenix Settlement, we also had African-American teachers at Oshlanga Institute, and one of them was a Miss Kay Blackburn, and she crossed over from Oshlanga Institute and visited Phoenix Settlement. But in terms of the history of Phoenix Settlement, we jump several decades. Charles Diggs, the congressman, visited Phoenix Settlement in 1971, and it was as a result of him that there was a boycott of the Sugar Association of South Africa. And then we had Reverend Jesse Jackson, who came in 1979, and he visited Phoenix as well. And he made a really stirring speech during that visit to South Africa, urging people to follow Gandhi and to go and march in the streets. And now we have Dr. Berry. And so Dr. Berry, you carry on in that tradition. In terms of the observations I wanted to make, I wanted to say that my grandmother Sushila in 1961 asked the Historical Monuments Committee whether they would consider declaring, what was the process for declaring Phoenix Settlement a national monument. This is a time at the height of apartheid and the silencing of Black protest. The answer from the Historical Monuments Committee was that different races would have to visit the settlement on different days. And that, of course, you know, toilets is at the heart of apartheid. There would have to be separate facilities erected at Phoenix for each race group. Needless to say, my grandmother totally dismissed this, and that was the end of that long story. Now, what I wanted to say is that Phoenix Settlement is a place. It has many buildings, and all these buildings have been recognized by the Sara Declaration. But Phoenix is a set of ideas, as some speakers have already mentioned. But what Gandhi said is that these ideas of Phoenix can be transported anywhere. So where the aims of Phoenix are present, there you will have Phoenix. So it is a transportable thing. And I think that's a very interesting idea. I think in terms of its composition, where there were a large number of Phoenix was grounded on being a multiracial community, a community that got together around a particular purpose. So I think in this permutation of race, religion, class, gender, and generation, the experiment at Phoenix was unique in South Africa. You had mission stations, but these were Christian mission stations. At Phoenix, all religions were represented. The languages at Phoenix were all the Indian languages, English and Zulu. This was spoken there. It was quite unusual. I also wanted to say that we should recognize that at Phoenix, what was being experimented with was a unique experiment in labor relationships, where everybody would actually get the same wage, and in addition have a stake in the land. So Gandhi's initial idea was that, you know, he would actually allow, in the end, workers would actually own that particular plot of land. That it didn't happen. We know that he was influenced by Ruskin. Last year, we celebrated 150 years of Gandhi And there was no mention in this country that it was 200 years of Ruskin's birth. And Ruskin is phenomenal. If you read Gandhi and he extracts principles from, he tells you in his autobiography what was significant. I went and read John Ruskin. You will not find that language in John Ruskin's book. You will find other things, and it is these other things that were really, really important, because Ruskin asked a fundamental question. What would be a just payment for a worker? And Gandhi at that time was struggling with what to pay the printing press workers. And this is how he came across with this. You know, I could give a whole lecture on Ruskin, but I'm aware of time. But the word Sarvodaya comes from Ruskin's book. It is Gandhi's translation of Ruskin's book. Now, I wanted to say that at the heart of the Phoenix, we must recognize that there was a printing press and a newspaper, Indian Opinion. And we must recognize that Gandhi was a journalist like all the Black journalists of that time. Salt Plaikey, the Sogas, the John Dubé, who was right near them, John Tengo, Jabavu. And, you know, if you read Indian Opinion, you will see Indian Opinion read all these newspapers, the press workers, and these papers are reflected in Indian Opinion. So what Indian Opinion did was to educate Indian readers about African disabilities and the African struggles. So that is a very important thing. And for 57 years, Indian Opinion was published and was then replaced by the Clinic, which Minister of Health so eloquently spoke about how his experiences were shaped there. I would be very remiss if I didn't say anything about what Phoenix settlement means for women. Because one of the things that Gandhi did from the is that, you know, women should not spend all their time in household labor. And in fact, he encouraged his daughter-in-law, is the eldest son's wife, Chanchal, to actually come into the press and to start learning how to compose. And he suggested that eventually she could get the same amount of money as the other press workers. And so women had a very significant role at Phoenix settlement. This is seen in Sushila Gandhi's role and in Ila Gandhi's role. And also Kasturba, who led the first batch of resistors from Phoenix settlement in 1913, when women for the first time joined the struggle, inspired by African women's struggle against the passers. So Phoenix might have started as a sort of an accommodation place for the press, but it became a satyagraha institution. And it became a training place for youth. And this is really quite significant because the youth were being educated at the school in Phoenix in a way that was very different from a colonial education. It was to educate them so that they became proud of their heritage and that they could actually study in their own language. And whereas colonial society taught that Black people were rubbish, the education at Phoenix was to develop a pride in your own heritage. Now, in the 1970s, work camps were set up for young people, and Rick Turner played a very significant role in organizing, the early camps. And, people who attended that camp found that it, and this is a quote by one youngster who's attended it, who said it was an oasis in the dry desert land of apartheid. Fauziya Turner said that the summer camps gave us a taste of what a free and open society could be. All organizations like New Sasso, all these organizations came to Phoenix Settlement. And Bonnie Patiana, who is a trustee of Phoenix Settlement, said that all in all, Phoenix Settlement was a place for engagement. I also want to say that Phoenix was a place for refuge. I just have a few points left, Vasu. That it was a place of refuge. Indentured workers came in their hundreds in 1913 to seek refuge from employers who were beating them up. In 1985, again, Phoenix settlement became a place of refuge for the people of Hambanati. 25 families fled Inkatha violence and found refuge at Phoenix settlement. And in their living there, they reproduced what the ethos of Phoenix was: communal living, cooking with each other, and sharing the work while they were living at Phoenix. Phoenix is extremely significant. We know that Gandhi fasted. He fasted to twist the viceroy of India. He fasted to twist the Hindus and the Muslims who were killing each other. But it is at Phoenix that he fasted for the very first time in his life to change behavior. So that is very significant. And this was carried throughout the decades by Manilal Gandhi, who fasted in 1952 for 21 days, by Sushila Gandhi, who fasted, by Mewar Rangobind, who fasted in 1971 against his banishment, and by Ela, who joined him in 1972 to protest against all the banishments in the country. Now, I wanted to end off with one particular point, and that is Gandhi had a package of how to live, and this package involved what you ate, and it involved hydrotherapy, it involved nature cure, and it was at Phoenix that he wrote a 20-part installments that were published in An Opinion, but writing in Phoenix in the middle of preparing for a struggle, 20 parts on what you should eat and what you should drink. And he said that he was actually the first vegan in the family, because he said, drink almond milk because cow's milk was really bad for you. He also did not drink tea and coffee and so forth, because these were produced on slave labor, black labor in the Congo, he specifically referred to. And so this was the Gandhian package. And so in this very rushed way, I've tried to encapsulate, over the generations, how some of the principles were taken forth and how some things carried on and maybe some things changed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uma. We are going to now, you see, you've tempted us. We're going to hold a webinar where you are going to take us through this entire history and philosophy. But thank you very much.
116 minutes.
No, thank you very much. Now we have two very short messages before we close with Ella Gandhi. Those two very short messages will come. They're very short but very strategic messages, because our next move from here is to get international recognition by UNESCO. And so Edva Ser is here with us today. She's an internationally recognized artist, a UNESCO Artist for Peace, a UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador and Special Envoy for Cultural Diplomacy. She's known for her sculptures, which have become symbols of peace, tolerance, and intercultural outreach. Edva's work includes tapestries, watercolors, and jewelry. She is one of Europe's pioneers using art to create social progress and education for peace. And she's going to be, Dr. Berry, one of our strongest advocates when we go to UNESCO. So a very short message from Edva. Edva, you have the floor. Please unmute yourself.
Is it okay now? Great. First of all, it's such an honor for me to be here tonight with all these prominent people, with everybody here. And as you already told about, all my career, everything that I'm doing, I just want to tell that all my life I was really inspired by the theory, by the everything that we learned about Mahatma Gandhi. It was really something which was based off my work for tolerance. And I was working, as you know, about a very famous sculpture, which is a tree of peace, which is one of the symbols of UNESCO. And it's all about living together, being, mutual respect, and all the religions, the sculptures about the religions, about respecting the nature. And this is one of the paths of education, because I'm building all over the world the really the tree of peace, the way to educate young people and everybody for peace. So all this was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. And with all my, I'm trying with all my help to do everything, you know, as working for tolerance, working a lot for tolerance, for dialogue, for intercultural dialogue, talking, you know, giving all the theory of UNESCO of the multicultural as a guarantee for the stability, for the political society. This is really one of my work, also as a godmother of artists coming all together from countries in conflict, working together. So you see, all this is really inspired by the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi. Artists working, building bridges for pieces through diversity into intercultural dialogue. So I try all my best to help Barry, and especially Ella, that I was so happy to see her again after 2 years, and to do with all my, really all my help to make a real recognition for this wonderful work that you made all together for the Phoenix Dialogue. So all my, you know, let's work together and do it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edva. And I think I would not be out of place if I said, Edva, could we not tempt you, cajole you, encourage you to give us one of your really good sculptures on peace that could now be put at the Gandhi settlement? I think it will be amazing if we can have that.
Yes, I think that this is really the right place for the sculpture, the Tree of Peace, because it's all about peace, as I explained to you together. And it's as I'm building the road of peace all over the world, just to have this in this, and with this very unique place, it will be light, it will lighten all the world from where peace is coming again. So this is, I think, a very important element to do it. So with pleasure, I will do it. And this is the right place, I think so.
Thank you very much, Edva. And if you have problems with the shipping costs, please bill it to the Premier's office. Now, we are very pleased to have today Dr. Victor Sebek, who is with us, another global peacemaker. Dr. Sebek is the chairman of the South-South Cooperation Council, a global NGO based in Colombia, which exchanges best practices among countries of the global South, with special emphasis on peace. He has led projects involving countries from the global South in the Caribbean, South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Arab world, and Southeast Asia. And he has also a very short message for us. Thank you very much, Victor. Victor, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, and warm greetings from Cartagena de Indias in Colombia, where I managed to return yesterday after 8 months being a refugee due to COVID, of course, and lockdown for 5 months in the Philippines and then in Britain and in France. And happy to say we had a very quick procedure where we can get a COVID test. I did it yesterday at 4 o'clock, and in 2 hours I got the result, which was fortunately negative. Now, we were extremely pleased to learn about the Phoenix settlement from Ella Gandhi, who is an eminent member of our board, as is Dr. Berry, and of course, Hedva Ser, amongst many other leaders, both in the world of politics and also science and academia. And we, at that point, at the resolution which we adopted in Cartagena in November 2018, said that we would support the process both in South Africa, but most importantly now that you have created in South Africa, thanks to your many efforts and those of National Association of African American Studies, that we can move to Paris. And I already had some meetings there with Hedva, but of course we couldn't do anything with UNESCO until you approved it in South Africa. So now the road has been open, and I can assure you that all of us, because we have other ambassadors, goodwill ambassador for UNESCO on our board, we will all do our best, guided by Hedva, to help. Now, to symbolize the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, we have, as an organization, prepared a series of messages. It was first a secret, but I had to break it out to Hedva, of 14 leaders, including former President of Guatemala, now the Secretary General of the Central American Integration System of 8 Central American countries and Dominican Republic, of Yvonne Baki, who is Ambassador of Ecuador in United States, and who herself helped end the last war in South America between Peru and Ecuador. Of course, the whole video will take about 35 minutes. Maybe we couldn't possibly send it there, but we will send it to Ella so that it can be used in the future. And because it was already mentioned how the principles of Phoenix Trust can be transported to any part of the world, I thought it was important for Ella and everybody in the Trust to know how popular and how inspirational this has been by the people who contributed from Eurasia, Southeast Asia, South America, and Arab world. Now, I also have to say that for me personally, this is an important challenge, not simply an intellectual one. And the reason is, as we spoke so much about peace and reconciliation, that I was born in a country which was destroyed in a very bloody civil war. I'm talking about former Yugoslavia. Secondly, that my father's family was all gassed in concentration camps in Germany. And my mother and my uncle were freedom fighters during the resistance. And my mother has helped save many Jews to escape from pogroms, so that my own family has done its own part in fight for racial equality. And then I worked in 3 countries which now sadly have been reduced to rubble. I'm talking about Libya, Yemen, and Syria. And my own adopted country, Colombia, has had the longest war in the Western Hemisphere that lasted more than 50 years until a peace agreement was signed 4 years ago. So the principle of Mahatma Gandhi for peace and reconciliation, of course, need to be known and are known all over the world, because they're applicable today where the global wars have been replaced by wars of proxy and by regional conflicts, which are perhaps today even more dangerous than ever because of the sophisticated weaponry. And whilst Mahatma Gandhi was also a fighter against colonialism, colonialism in its classical form has been extinguished, of course, but we also have modern contemporary forms of colonialism, particularly pronounced in Africa, which are no less harmful to the countries of the South than was the classical colony. So warm regards to all of you, and we certainly, in SSCC, will do all our best to help in the next stage of the Phoenix Settlement Trust recognition by the UN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. And we all know the futility of all of the wars here, especially on our continent with Libya, the futility of having dealt with it in the way that the Western powers dealt with Libya. And that's why we inherited such a destroyed country and a continent that is now having to deal with the fallout in the entire Sahel region. So we know what that means, but now, you know, if Mahatma Gandhi was here, it would not be necessary to read his bio. And the scion of the Gandhi family is here, known to all of us simply as Ella. She needs no introduction. I don't need to read Ella's CV. Everybody knows Ella. And everybody knows Ella's history in South Africa, which has been extremely consistent for her entire life. A pacifist, a true pacifist, and a proponent of nonviolence. So, Ella, we give you the floor.
Thank you so much. I think firstly, I must thank all the people who came so willingly, particularly, you know, the minister, the premier, the high commissioner, Dr. Berry, Victor, Hedva, Joanne Sadler, and our trustee, Nhlanhla, yourself, Vasu, and everyone who has helped, including some of the people who are in the audience, and some of the people who are part of the NAS. But what I want to say in particular is that whilst, appreciating the support that all of you have given at this time, this recognition coming at a time when we are struggling against the COVID-19 pandemic is of great significance. We have been told by our president that life cannot be normal post-COVID. We have to look at a new normal. And when we look at all the issues that have come up as a result of the COVID-19, what we see, emerging, the huge divide between the rich and the poor, between the rich countries and the poor countries, and within countries. When we see all the violence that is going on, you look at the negative sides on the one hand, but on the other hand, you also see the generosity that people have, shown during this period, the compassion, all the frontline workers who have, risked their lives in order to bring comfort and good health to other people. We really appreciate that, and that is the spirit that we need to grow. This is what Gandhiji has been speaking about. So let us have a paradigm shift, a shift from the old where we looked at materialism, where we looked at ourselves, how can we improve our own lives, at how we can improve other people's lives, everybody's lives, and how we can help everyone. And that is contained both in Gandhian philosophy, especially the Sarvodaya, which means the good of all. And Uma spoke about how that is linked to Ruskin's idea. So it's about how we can get together, how we can look at everybody. And particularly in Africa, we look at our own philosophy of Ubuntu. So how can we get back to that philosophy of Ubuntu? And this is what we need to grapple with now, so that going post-COVID, we have this philosophy to take forward and improve everybody's lives. So I think that this significance to Phoenix settlement, and if we can have the World Heritage Site, we can promote this idea not just in South Africa, but South Africa can become the promoter of these ideas for the rest of the world. And so that is how I am seeing this. I know that I'm at the other end of the stick now. The young people who are here, Dr. Berry, our minister, our premier, I think our premier is even younger than the minister, and all the other people who are present here. These young people are the ones who can create that. They have the power. Let's go for it. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for this. And let's look at a new world that we can create going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ila. As you can all see, a person of very few words, but of very powerful stature here in South Africa, on the African continent, and globally. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, fellow peace travelers, my most favorite quote of Mahatma Gandhi is the one which says, "There is enough to feed everybody's need, but not enough in the world to feed everybody's greed." And if you go to the Gandhi settlement, as I'm sure many of you have been, and we encourage all the rest of you who have not been to go there, you will see very starkly the need in that sea of poverty that surrounds the Gandhi settlement. And just across the river on the other side, you will see unimaginable opulence. all existing side by side. And yes, his words ring true in that particular settlement, that there is enough to feed the need of the poor in the community, as well as to feed the opulent on the other side, but not enough to feed the greed of everybody. So what Ila has said now, let us all work together to build a better world, a world in which we can feed everybody's need and not everybody's greed. Have a great evening and a good weekend, and thank you all for attending.